In this presentation, I want to give you a real brief overview about some of the additional scripts that I've provided that I think will add some important functionality to your marble game level. Now, inside the lessons folder, I've provided a more scripts zip file with a brief description of what some of these examples are. And you can get started by downloading the marble.zips file and unzipping it to your desktop. But before I jump into Unity, I do want to point out that that there's some really great documentation. If you read the Unity documentation, there's a lot of scripting reference and other important information that you can find, and I've provided the link here. And also, if you haven't already become part of the Unity community through the Unity website, there's discussion boards. There's an ask or an answer wiki. If you're not using those and leveraging those and researching questions and problems inside that community, I would highly recommend that you do that, particularly as you spend more time in Unity and you start developing your own scripts. It's really great to have the help of the developer community, which is out there, and they're really willing to help. So if you get hung up on some scripts and you kind of head off into an area where you're getting a little lost with some complicated scripts as you push forward with the development, it's a really good idea to do some research inside the community. So I'm going to jump over to Unity, and I want to talk about a couple of the scripts that are inside the More Scripts folder. Now, I've just opened the More Scripts folder. I'm just going to select these and drag and drop those into Unity. And I want to point out that I'm not going to demonstrate every one of these scripts, but I do want to start off with the AnimationTrigger, since we had just left off talking about animation. And I do want to point out the importance of reading the commented code. So if I go into the AnimationTrigger and I open that up, I want to point out that I've done my best to comment these in a very straightforward and logical way. And I also want to point out that in some cases with certain scripts, I've commented out some additional functionality to keep them as simple as possible. So in the event that you want to experiment with some of this functionality, you can just get rid of the slashes in front of those lines, and that makes those lines readable by the Unity compiler. So if we look at the AnimationTrigger script, this is a really simple script, and all it does is when you enter a trigger or a collider that's been set to a trigger, you can trigger an animation on an existing object. And so to demonstrate this, I'll jump back into Unity. I have an existing animation that is set on this hazard cube, and if I hit the play button, I currently have play automatically turned off. So you can see that my previous animation it's attached and it's ready to go, but it's the play automatically has been turned off. If I turn it back on and I hit the play button, it's going to loop just like we saw in the last presentation. There I can see it looping in the background, and I'll toggle play automatically. Now, I don't want to attach the animation script to this object necessarily, although I could. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little trigger object here just before I get to this platform, and I'm going to use that as the thing that triggers the animation to start. And I could use any old object here, and just for the sake of reference, I'm going to use a capsule. And I'll look at this from the top down. I'll move it over. I'll look at this from the side really quickly and make sure it's not right where it's at, which is kind of way off in somewhere else. So I'll just kind of move this around, and I'll get it right where I want it. Now remember, in order for to get many of these scripts to work, when you introduce an object, you have to make sure that isTrigger is turned on. In the case of the animation, I'll just open this back up. It'll say so in the code depending on what kind of object it needs to interact with, whether it's a collision or a trigger. And in this case, it's a trigger, which suggests to me that I got to go back to Unity, and any object that I want to attach this to, I have to go into the collider object and make sure isTrigger is turned on. Okay, so now that this object is set up as a trigger, I haven't attached any scripts to it yet, but I can take my marble, and rather than bouncing off of it, I can pass right through it, and I'm actually triggering something. Nothing's happening right now, but it is triggering some kind of an event. And in fact, let me want to move my marble a little bit closer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop the animation trigger to the capsule object, because in this demonstration the thing that I want to trigger the animation is the capsule. Got that wrong. I tried to move my marble and I sent the capsule. So let me just move my marble. I was looking at it backwards. So I'm going to move my marble. I'm going to select my capsule. It is a trigger, and I'm going to drag and drop the animation trigger onto that object, whether I do it in the hierarchy or with it selected. I can do it right in the inspector window. If I look at this animation trigger script, I can see the script that's been attached to this capsule object, and there's also a target field. Now the target field, this is the thing that I need to drag the object that has the animation into this field. And so I've renamed this cube hazard. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my capsule. I'm going to focus on the script here, but I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look for my hazard object. And I'll drag and drop my hazard into the target of this animation script. And so what that's saying is that when I hit this capsule trigger, it's going to play whatever animation happens to be attached to this object. Okay, and that animation we created in the last presentation. So I'll hit the play button. And now when I come over here, the platform's not moving, but when I encounter the trigger, I've just triggered that animation to start playing. And that can be, you know, add a lot of functionality, because we could trigger these pressure plates which start to animate hazards. We could also have another trigger over here which actually stops that animation. So there's a lot of things that we can do just with the simple script that we have, and then modifying the existing scripts. So that's the animation script. I'll push forward in the next presentation and take a look at some additional scripts.